Sounds good. It's not hers.
Hey guys, you gotta start going back to Muni's. Great Philly cheesesteak. You gotta try it out. Little Muni's, try the hamburgers and Philly cheesesteak.
You're fine.
I'm the poorest man here. That's just
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fine.
Yep, the audio's off, Commissioner, so we're good.
Afternoon. City of Helena Administrative Meeting, May 18, 2022, 4 p.m. This meeting is called to order. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll, please?
City Attorney Doctor,
Here.
City Manager Burton,
Here.
Commissioner Dean,
Here.
Commissioner Fever,
Here.
Commissioner Reed,
Here.
Commissioner Logan,
Here.
Mayor Collins.
Here. Welcome and thank you for participating in the City of Helena's Commission meeting. We are pleased to be able to provide this alternative meeting format in the city's effort to broaden public participation. Please be patient as we may experience technical difficulties during the meeting. We welcome your public commentary. Please read the following tips and guidelines for the app usage and your participation. The first thing on our agenda today is Community Development Department, but before we go that says it's Community Development, I know we have a guest in our midst. And, I mean, it's not team now. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I'd like to take this opportunity and thank you, Mayor, for allowing me to do so, to introduce Chris Brink, who is our new Community Development Director, started on Monday. And as you know, Chris comes to Montana, a lifelong dream of relocating his family from Pickens County. He has over 25 years experience in the community development business. And so I'd just like to take this opportunity to welcome Chris to the team.
Thank you, Tim. Members of the commission, as promised, I am here. It has been a wonderful 3.5 days, 2.5 days actually. I am fully immersed in everything city related now, except for the budget. So I'm going to leave all the presentations to Kim and Lucy. They've worked hard on the budget for the department. We've got Kara and Ellie here too, that are available for questions. But I don't want to take any thunder from them. They've worked hard, so all the presentations will be them. Moving forward, of course, I'll be part of the budget. Any questions, feel free to ask. But I'm going to turn it all over to them. But ecstatic to be here.
The way Lucy's laughing, it looks like she wanted to turn it over to you.
Well, so then I asked about the hot seat. I said, no, I'm sitting back here. They're in the hot seat. So
All right, thank you. So, senior planner, you have the floor.
I'm going to let,
If you don't mind, I'll just do a brief introduction. Community Development Department. We've actually got 3 funds. The community. I'm on my introduction. I'm on my notes.
but you
I
get
didn't
to
print a copy.
okay, that'd be good.
We've got the planning division, community development in general, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and then the building division. The planning division handles the land use cases, development projects, subdivisions, amended plats, zoning, and some of those other development related type projects. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund, this fund is intended to serve as a gap financing resource for organizations in our community who are addressing affordable housing needs. And then the building division conducts construction plan reviews, permitting, inspections for all the construction projects in town to ensure compliance with the applicable codes and regulations and stuff. So with that, I'll let Lucy kind of run through the community development, and that is Fund 014 on page 4.
thank you very much for having us today. This is a good opportunity to let you know all the wonderful things that our department planning division is doing. And so I'd like to start with just where we've been this year. We have done a number of land use applications, over 80. Those include applications including major subdivisions that are relatively complicated, all the way down to amended plats, which are much simpler. So we've been very busy with those. Those require public comment, public outreach. We also staff a number of boards and committees, zoning commission, planning board, ADA, TIF. That staffing those boards requires time to do the minutes, the public outreach, the notifications, and just helping them do their job. So that is also a very important component of our department. We also administer a number of grants. We have Ellie Ray here who could talk to that if you have questions. And the housing coordinator who does a number of housing related projects. Kara can speak to those if you have questions on that. And then we just have everyday outreach to the community. We get phone calls from other jurisdictions asking us how we do things, how our code is applied. We also work with state legislature in developing legislation that applies to us, MAP in the League of Cities and Towns. So our department is broad and very busy. And in addition to that, we have a lot of plans for upcoming activities that we have on our agenda to do. One of those is updating the zoning ordinance for a number of components. That includes recreational marijuana legislation, land use chart update, signs, landscaping, mobile homes. There's a long list of things we want to update in the zoning ordinance. Also, implementation of the growth policy. We have a relatively new growth policy, and part of that implementation includes neighborhood plans. And that's part of the budget items in here deal with those neighborhood plans and getting that rolling. One of the first areas we've identified is the Railroad District, used to be referred to as the 6th Ward or Midtown. It's had a lot of names. But we're working on developing a neighborhood plan for that area. And we have funds in the budget that would help us do that. There are also some internal things related to how we operate. And that's with, I don't know if you're familiar with Track It. It's our electronic file keeping system. There are a number of issues with that we would like to work on training and continue moving towards that electronic filing system. We don't have a lot of capital requests from the planning department, our part of the division. But there are a number of opportunities that we would like to reflect it in the budget. One of those is working with adjacent jurisdictions on standardizing infrastructure planning and regulations to facilitate annexation and sustainable growth in the area. And one of those items in there is a consultant to help that. We would like to work with the county on that. I don't know that we would be ready to use those funds in the next fiscal year, but we would like to keep that in there just in case. And then some of the things we always are cognizant of is staffing. Right now, we are short a planner one and training. There's a number of training opportunities in the budget that we've identified. So in a very quick nutshell, that is what we do and why we're here. And we are very happy to present what we do.
Is there something going on? Because you're way too happy for this. You smiled all through the presentation. So, you know.
I like planning, I really do, but I'm retiring on Friday.
That's why she's so happy.
Any comments or questions for Ms. Gangler?
I did.
Go ahead.
I have a couple actually. The first one, and I should have looked back at one of my old budget books, but I did not, I failed to do so. We talked during the joint city county budget session about the historic preservation officer funding. And I know we've been at 20,000 for the last few years, and I believe previous to that, it was split half and half, I think. Do you remember what that amount was, and was it just the reason it was reduced was because the city just didn't want to pay as much, or is there any background that we can gather on that?
Commissioners, I am not familiar with this.
Okay.
I do know what you said is accurate, I just don't know the rationale.
Okay,
I think I can shed some light. At the time, the previous commission thought that most of the work was being done for the county and versus the city. So that's why they thought the county should be able to up their amount, but I think it's way overdue for the city to be able to measure up. Go ahead.
If I recall, and Director Danielson, I think the way we used to split it was 50-50 with the
Right.
county. And at that time, I think it was 20,000 apiece. And then I think the city's contribution fell off. Is that right?
Thank you, Mayor and Manager Burton. So we are still budgeting $20,000 both in fiscal 22 and fiscal 23 for the historic preservation officer.
And do you know where the county level of funding is?
I do not. I don't know.
It's
that
like
amount.
40 or so.
Are they 40?
I want to say it might be.
40,000.
Well, actually,
It's right in here, right? I think it's double ours right now. And
All I know, Mayor, is one of the county commissioners stopped me in the hallway and said that they'd like to talk about getting back to a 50-50 split on the office.
Okay.
And that was just a hallway conversation. I've been thinking about it.
okay, that was just one thing. I remember, I think it was in my first budget session, there was conversation about us having reduced it. I don't know if we got a reason why it had been, but just something I'd be interested in, because I know that's a position that has to, like any of the demolition permits or anything like that go to that position. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, it starts in the community development department.
Okay. And then my other question, just switching gears a little bit. This is for the grant for the housing coordinator. Do we know kind of how that position is going with Good Samaritans, or, you know, how do we interface with it? And I mean, I'm gonna guess with you, probably we're able to maximize our impact with it, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, and I don't
I
know.
would like to introduce Kara,
I'm sorry.
who will answer that. Since you didn't get an official introduction.
Mayor and commissioners, I think, and I'll maybe defer to Ellie a little bit as well, just because she's had more experience with the program, but so we do just have a new housing navigator in that position as of, I think, 1 month ago or maybe 2 months ago. So I think they're getting their feet under them. And I maybe can give more information as we move along in that process with them, and they're a little bit more comfortable, but is there any more specific information?
Well, I was curious if if that covers their full salary, or, I'm just wondering, there's obviously a lot of need, and, with the work that you're doing, are we able to maximize our impact with that, or just kind of what does the relationship look like?
Sure. Yeah, and so I think we're putting forth 30 grand per year, and then the county matches that with an additional 30 grand.
Okay.
And so I think that covers their salary, benefits, and then they're actually seeking funding for some of the other, like they provide some incentives for landlords who might be engaging in Section 8 housing or items like that.
Okay.
So it certainly doesn't cover every single piece of what they're doing out of that program, but it does cover all of the housing navigator salary and benefits.
I think historic preservation is just short of here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. The TIF, the last time we looked at TIF, there were 3 proposals that came from the TIF board here for this neighborhood. 1 was accepted and 2 were basically withdrawn. And I understand that they are coming back sometime or not. They are. I see heads nodding.
I'll defer to Ellie Ray for that.
Yeah, Mary Commissioners, yes. There are 2 proposals, as you noted, that we had slated to go forward in February, and then we paused that while we did a deeper dive review of state statute to assure that, they do fully align with what is an allowed expenditure for TIF funding. So they are going to come back to you next month on the 6th. And we will also be presenting a work plan for the district at the time, which basically prioritizes from the goals and objectives of the urban renewal district plan for the downtown, the areas that the TIF advisory board feel are the ones that are the most in need of funding to prioritize for specific types of projects.
So speaking more about TIF, the memorial apartments are coming down sometimes.
Yes, your commissioners, the Memorial Park apartments fall within the Railroad Tax Financing
Yes.
District, and they are set for demolition sometime this construction season, I believe.
And I have one other question. It has to do with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. There was a group put together by that ordinance to talk about that and bring recommendations forward or something of that nature. Is that going to happen soon?
Mayor and commissioners, so we're actually, I think the group initially convened in January, and we've been doing monthly meetings since. So their kind of first big task has been to vet the program guidelines and our application process for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And we're very near to the end of that. So I think we have, our consultant who's been working on that, drafting those policies, currently has their most recent round of edits, and he's working on getting those worked into the document, and then we can hopefully at that point send it over to our legal team.
So what will it look like when it comes to the commission?
Yep, so we'll have, right now we have, I think it's like around a 17 or 18 page document that outlines the eligible uses of the fund, and I guess, provides a little bit of an introduction as to how the funds came to be and what their purpose is, and then lays out who can apply for it and what those funds can be used for.
And a timeline sort of thing?
I'm sorry, what
A
was that?
timeline sort of thing?
Yep, so we'll have, that's included in our, I guess both documents, but right now our application has a pretty detailed timeline of when to apply, and then from there what that process looks like for the applicants.
Okay, my last question is just we've talked about a housing coordinator, and in the budget, it's a housing navigator. Are they the same thing?
They are not, so I'm the housing coordinator. And I get that a lot, I get confused with the housing navigator, but that's a position that we jointly fund with the county and it's
The
housed.
housing navigator.
The navigator, correct,
Okay.
and that's housed at Good Samaritan.
So you are strictly a city employee, not a city county employee.
That's correct.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any, excuse me, do I have any other questions for the senior planner before she retires?
My last question on the,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
oh, no, you didn't. It was, no, you're fine. For the neighborhood planning consultant, is that specifically to focus on 6th Ward, or will that also be the Capitol Hill Mall planning? Because I think those are the 3 downtown,
Right.
is that correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Mayor and Commissioners, they started outreach to the railroad district. So they seem to be in a position that might be using that first, but I don't think that this decision has been made as to which one would go first. But
We don't have, I don't know what we're gonna call it, since the mall doesn't actually exist anymore, but
You better call it a mall for
the
understanding.
the Capitol Hill Mall URD, we don't have a board yet for that, correct?
Mayor Commissioners, no, none has been established.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other final questions? Okay, please continue.
Okay, so I'm Kim Mack. I will look at the, present the building division in. And just briefly, the building division is fully funded by the fees that we collect through our permit and our plan review fees. We don't receive any money from the general fund for salaries, benefits, or any of our expenditures. It's all from our permit fees. We can, and we use it to just support the building division fees. We also help support the fire marshal fees, expenditures that are directly related to new building construction, doing plan review and inspections on these new construction projects. You know, some of the things that we've accomplished this last year to date. This fiscal year, as of today, we've got over 2,650 permits that we've issued to the tune of about $128 million in construction value, and have completed over 5,400 inspections on the various properties in town. There's a lot of those in addition to a lot of inspections that are not actually recorded as consultation inspections. Contractor calls up, asks our inspectors, hey, what about? And we go over there, they'll go over there, help them out, kind of lead them through some of this stuff. So those folks are busy all day long, whether it's a recorded inspection in our system or not. They make themselves available. Plan reviewers are taking phone calls all day. They review those plans, get them out in as a timely manner as possible. In our admin staff, they're on the phone and answering emails all day long, scheduling inspections, accepting projects, entering them into our system, issuing permits, taking money, the whole bit. We've been working with Central Square, our active permit system right now, and Tyler with the finance department to kickstart our online program. So we've been working hard to get that e-track it process going so that we can, the applicants can go online and apply for their permits, pay their fees and things like that. So we're working on that, and hopefully we can get that started. It just seems like it's been going on and on and on. No fault of ours or theirs, it's just a combination of everybody being busy and stuff. In FY22 this year, we were able to afford a affordable housing fee waiver for fire tower apartments for nearly $30,000. So that went out to the applicant on that to help basically refunds their building permit and plan review fees. So to help, so an incentive for that affordable housing. In FY '22, as you recall, we did the Red Alder residence, and that was about $139,000 that we refunded on that for the city. In our goals and our future items that we're looking to, of course, get e-tracking implemented, the online portion, get that going. As you can see in our budget, we have requested an additional staff, an additional combination inspector. We have 3 inspectors in our office right now that cover the entire town. They are all building and residential, commercial and residential building certified. And then we have a plumbing mechanical, an electrician, and then a building inspector that came from the construction industry with 30+ years of construction industry. So so what we're hoping to get another inspector with the amount of growth that we anticipate. Just doing some rough numbers of ones that projects that we have heard about. We're looking at in the neighborhood in just residential, 800 to 900 new units. Might be over the next 5 or 8 years, but there's going to be considerable growth from the far west end of town to the far east end of town. So there's a lot of ground that those folks cover. We're looking for that if it is approved. As far as capital requests over the next several years, in FY '23, we have no capital requests. I have ordered another vehicle in FY '22 that we were approved for. Ordered that in December. We haven't seen it yet. And I understand that they're not going to pay for it until we receive it. So if we don't get it before the end of the year, we'll have to carry that over into next year. But we do have a vehicle available if we are approved for another inspector. We do have one that they can use. And we also have a workstation and computer that we've used for an on-call plan reviewer and inspector. So we do have those improvements already available if we are approved for an additional position. We've got, let's see, that things that we see coming up, having qualified staff availability and retention. Everyone in the state is looking for building inspectors and plan reviewers. And so we're one of the big things for our inspectors. I'm requesting a pay grade increase for them to bring them up to the level of our plan reviewers. Plan review is very important to make sure that what goes out to the field for the contractors is built to code. The inspectors, their job is to be sure that it does meet that. So it's the importance of those 2 positions go hand in hand. They've been at a lower rate, so I'm requesting that they get boosted up to that higher rate. I had one inspector that went to the state because he could get a lot more money. Fortunately, we were able to backfill that position with a very qualified individual. So I'm happy for that, but I certainly don't want to lose the folks that I have now. And then the regional pay study, when that comes forward, additional for not only my department, but every department. So that retention. Training is another thing. A lot of our staff, the inspectors, plan reviewers, all have to have certifications. We update codes every 3 to 5 years. We will, as I mentioned, I think in earlier meetings, we will see that this summer. We'll start bringing that next code edition in, and so they have to go through a lot of training to be brought up to speed. And then, of course, licensing. We've got a master plumber, a master electrician, myself as an architect, to maintain all of those licenses and certifications and continue ed requirements that we have on those. So that's all I have as far as what we do and what I'm requesting. So if you have any questions. Available.
Thank you, Ms. Mack. Comments or questions for Ms. Mack?
So are the new or the proposed new FTE and increased steps included in the budget numbers we have?
In that salary and benefits?
Yes, Mayor and Commissioners, both the new combination billing inspector and the grade adjustments are in the current budget.
Any other comments or questions?
So the presumption is that that's how it should be.
Yes.
I get it. I'm good with that. I mean, at least I understand that the budget includes what the proposed new staffing salary increases are contemplated to secure. So I'm good with that. Otherwise, there'd be some, they would be, or that what we just heard, we would not have heard.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Commissioner.
Are we getting much interest in the fee waivers besides those two projects? And those are the only two that have happened since I've been here, but
You know, of the Commissioner, what we haven't had any additional requests. I would anticipate when our Redeemers project comes through, we will potentially see if it is within that 60% median income.
does
range.
Habitat ever apply?
No, because it's not the 60%.
Oh, okay.
So there's the way that ordinance, I think it's 3277, it's pretty explicit, and then it has to maintain that level and stuff. So it's pretty explicit on those requirements. But I think our Redeemers right now is the only one I can think of that may have some buildings and uses in there that would qualify.
Especially if I may, there might be another one coming down the pike. There is an outfit based out of Missoula that are looking to build a senior apartment building that they're currently have been invited to submit a full tech application for the state. So that might be 3 or so units north prospect. Yeah. So conceivably, sorry, apologies.
That's okay.
That might be the only other one that I think we know of. So.
Yeah, Habitat's definitely expressed interest, but that income limit is, they can't meet that. So.
Probably a conversation for another day, but it would be worth reconsidering. Not that I want to eliminate a self-funded department's revenue, but also hear about it all the time.
Mayor and Commissioners, it is the way that ordinance is written. One of the things is that it doesn't affect, you know, if the building fund can afford to do that, then we have the ability to do that. You know, so as long as it doesn't jeopardize the city.
Yeah.
So it's something to evaluate.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Ms. Mack, just a question, forgive me if I'm being daft here. The revenues are 1.3 and the expenses are 1.4. And I know you're self-funded, but when you do have the overage and expenditures versus revenues, how is that handled?
So by state law, we can carry a 1 year's reserve because we get our money from the general fund. If we have, you know, the building cycle is just like this. So if we have those low years, then we can pull out of that reserve to fund our department.
Mayor, it's been a multi-session priority of cities. We agreed to make that 2 years. And the last time it got shot down was because a legislator in Columbia Falls saw a building inspector having a cup of coffee at 11 o'clock. Yeah. So it fell off the radar, but I think that should still be a priority of ours because the market goes up and down so dramatically. We should try to increase that to 2 years.
Is that a real reason?
Yes, it is.
It's happened before on other issues.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments for Ms. Mack? Okay, please continue. What you done?
That is all I have.
Thank you for your presentation. We'll move along. Facilities, city facilities. Superintendent, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Troy Sampson, Community Facilities Superintendent. I will be presenting the FY23 budget for the Facilities Department. Our divisions of the department are the Facilities Management Division and Facilities Project Management. Fiscal year 22 has been a busy year for our department. Some of the accomplishments this year have been, we did a condition assessment, was performed on all the city facilities and jointly owned facilities that are managed by the facilities department. We've implemented a maintenance management software program that will allow us to better track the conditions of our assets, maintenance schedules, capital outlay schedules, and track our energy usage. The department has accomplished several projects this year. At the main fire station, we replaced the roof, and at both fire stations, we managed the installation of security upgrades and enhancements. At the Missouri River Treatment Plant, we installed new heaters in the SED 3 building and replaced the air conditioning system in the high zone building. Missouri River, we also completed the second floor remodel, which included remodeling the restrooms, showers, kitchenette, painting, and trim. We also had a PVC coating installed over piping insulation in the main water plant building. At the 10 Mile Water Treatment Plant, we managed the replacement of their west asphalt parking lot. At the city shop, we had 2 new offices constructed and completed an LED lighting retrofit of the entire facility. At the Civic Center, we completed the Spire painting project. That was a 2-year project due to weather. We replaced the Benton Avenue entry sidewalk and completed the concept design for the proposed air conditioning for the ballroom in the auditorium. With Bill Roberts Golf Course, we had a main west entry door replacement that was necessary. We replaced that with a telescoping door that hopefully the wind won't affect. And we repaired and painted walls throughout that facility. At the City County building, we performed repairs on the east entry facade over the entry doors. We created a lactation room on the 4th floor for nursing mothers. Also repaired several plaster walls and ceilings. And we're just wrapping up the security upgrades project in the City County building. We recently completed the remodel for the county motor vehicle division service windows and elections department storage rooms. And we completed the design for the North ADA parking lot project and anticipate putting that project out to bid in the next month. One of the last things at the Law and Justice Center, we completed the police patrol room remodel. And we also remodeled the room in the basement for the sheriff's department for record storage and designed the remodel of the 3rd floor of the pillar building and are anticipating putting that project out to bid in June. Some of the goals that we have for fiscal year 23, one is to have an energy efficiency assessment performed on all of our facilities. So this will help us identify energy saving projects that we can bring forward in the FY24 budget and beyond. Another goal is to utilize the new maintenance management software program to its full potential so that we can collect preventive maintenance, repair, and replacement data for facility equipment and repairs. My team will have the ability to evaluate the data and recognize problems prior to system failures. The full implementation of the software will also allow our staff to be more responsive to our clients. Our biggest priority is to take care of the critical needs that have been identified. These priorities include replacement of the boiler system at the Law and Justice Center, the city shop, and the main fire station. Also, the replacement of the roofs on the pillar building and the atrium conference room at the Law and Justice Center, the Civic Center auditorium barrel roof, the city shop roof, and the Grand Street Theater roof. And then construction of the City County Building North 88 parking lot. We have several capital improvement projects that are also a priority for our department that we are proposing to fund through the 212 fund reserves. And those projects are the Fire Station 1 boiler replacement, Fire 1 air handler, the city shop boiler replacement, city shop office unit heaters, HVAC for the Parks Maintenance Building offices, Fire Station number 1 kitchen cabinets and countertops in their living quarters, city shop floor grinding, and Parks Maintenance Building outdoor signage. The city county building reserves will fund conference room audio visual improvements in the commission chambers in 326, 426, and 309. An LED lighting retrofit for the first floor of city county building. Tile roof repairs on the 1901 section of the facility. We have a pad heat boiler that needs to be replaced. And then we have some sidewalks on the south side of the building. We're going to do a partial replacement. And those would be funded by the City County Building Reserve Fund. Law and justice improvements are being funded with an equal contribution from the city and the county, and we've discussed those when we met at the joint meeting. Those projects are the atrium roof replacement, boiler replacement, the pillar roof replacement, restroom upgrades in the pillar section, and the southwest parking lot lighting installation. There are several other projects that need to be completed that we've not identified funding for. It's our priority to identify funding for these projects, whether it be ARPA funding, a GEO bond, or contributions from the city. In order of priority, these projects are Civic Center barrel roof replacement or the auditorium. Transfer station has 2 AC units in the transfer station break room that need replaced. City shop roof replacement, Grand Street Theater roof replacement, Civic Center repair and repointing of the exterior walls. Transfer station also has an overhead door that needs replaced. 10-mile water treatment plant has some exterior walls that are failing and need replaced. We'd like to do a water line, so a drinking water line throughout the facility at the Civic Center, do a condition assessment on those lines. We've had several failures in the last few years. The neighborhood center is another one that we leased that facility to Rocky Mountain Development Council. There are some needs for asphalt parking lot, mill and overlay, exterior wall repairs. The wastewater treatment plant has an asphalt parking lot that was identified that needed a mill and overlay. And 10 Mile has a phase 2 parking lot replacement need also. The other goals that we have are to ensure that other departments' operational needs are met. And that can come as requests from those departments or in some cases the county and the general facilities. A few of those private requests are the remodel of the third floor of the Law and Justice Center for the County Criminal Justice Services Department and the County Grants Purchasing Department. City Human Resources has also requested a remodel of their space to benefit their operation. Public Works is requesting a large office space be divided into multiple offices to assist their operation. These requests have been or will be requested in those departments' budgets. There is an additional project that was requested by the fire department that we're bringing forward, and that is the remodel of the East Side Fire Station restroom and locker room. Funding for this project needs to be identified. We have several other capital projects that will be discussed as part of the capital improvement discussions. And we'll be having those at a later date. If there's any questions on that?
Thank you, Mrs. Sampson. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Superintendent Sampson. I'm very happy to hear about the energy efficiency project. I didn't see a funding request in here, but maybe I'm not looking in the right place. So I'd be curious to know what the funding looks like for that, and if you're moving in the direction of something like, energy, net zero energy for the city facilities. I know Bozeman recently did a dashboard where they've been measuring their progress. And are you looking at something like that as you go forward, or can you tell me a little bit about where that's going?
Sure. So this project, it originated in conjunction with the sustainability coordinator, that position a year or so ago, when Patrick Judge was here. So he was kind of spearheading that, and we were going to put out an RFP and have different contractors come in, engineers, and do an assessment. In some cases, if you do performance contracting, there isn't a cost up front. So that's why you don't see a budget request. And we're hoping that that could be a mechanism when we do performance contracting, where they're guaranteeing their design will in fact create energy savings for us and allow us to do those projects.
Superintendent Sampson, I know a while ago, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure as to what kind of development was done at Grand Street, but I know there was some repairs, and I'm thinking it was the roof. Am I wrong?
Mr. Mayor, so we had a roof repair. It was on it wasn't the main roof.
Okay.
It was on the south side, and they had a failure of an addition that had a roof on it, so it's a small portion, and that was replaced. The main roof right now, the shingles, it's asphalt shingles, and they're blown off, and it's in need of repair. Currently, in our structural facilities, we don't have a fund for Grant Street. In our lease agreement, they maintain the inside of the building, but we have a responsibility for the exterior foundation and that kind of thing. So we've identified, the roof being one project that needs to be done.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. This may be for Mr. Burton. So Superintendent Sampson outlined quite a few potential projects that perhaps, as we're considering ARPA, we might look at. With the general fund, we got kind of a summary here of all the various wishes that they had in their funds, and of course, after a while, it racks up quite a bit of money. And do we have a similar sheet for facilities?
I think we do have a similar sheet, and I think that
Sounds like
a couple of conversations will be taking place. Probably starting next week, we're going to start reviewing the general fund, aren't we? Or is it the week after?
Next week, we'll be bringing the, excuse me, thank you, Mr. Burton and Commissioner. We'll be bringing back the general capital fund request to the commission to make final recommendation on what you would like to fund and allocate a recommended amount that the general fund can afford to spend on those requests. I do know that Superintendent Saxon does have a fairly lengthy assessment list of facility needs that was part of the consulting project for his facility assessment and tracking software. And as he has an opportunity to go through that and bring it all together, that will then be brought before the commission with the total capital improvement discussions to try to understand how we can utilize ARPA funds to help fund some of those needs.
Will there be a priority list, prioritize your needs?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we have, with the projects that we have listed, we did prioritize them.
Mayor, commissioners, following this budget process, or at least the wrapping up of the budget process and the discussions that you all will have with the 440 fund and any reserves that you want to put toward capital projects, then we'll start a discussion between and among the commission to say, okay, here's the parameters for the ARPA. And that may be city projects only, or you may want to go to nonprofits or affordable housing, whatever you decide. Then we'll gather those projects for your consideration, probably until you run out of money, because I think you will run out of money.
But that would be,
Okay, 10 minutes.
And in addition to that process, and I've had discussions with the county about recreating the city county planning board or facilities board. And primarily, I mean, there are some larger projects in this building, but primarily for the Law and Justice Center. And how do we address those critical issues over time? Do we bond it? Do we put it into our rental rates? So I think there's a good 3 conversations that we're going to be having relative to allocating dollars toward capital projects. And how do we figure out our way moving forward, particularly on the Law and Justice Center? And how does that integrate with the rates that we charge and how we organize the staff within facilities so that the manager can more directly allocate resources where they're needed at the time without having to worry about how they're being funded through the county or the city or both. And in addition to that, as a part of our discussions moving forward, there's a pretty good cash balance in this fund. And over time, just because that's the way we get it, we would allocate whatever rent the fire department paid would, then we make a capital fund for the fire department. And I think we need to rethink that. If we've got $1 million there and we have a critical issue in one of our major facilities, why not just fix it? So that would be the 4th conversation that we'll have with the commission.
all right. I see the question.
I do, I 2 questions. My first one is, I'm pretty sure it's helpful that Mayor jogged our memory on the Grand Street roof project. I think that was like $20,000. Do we know what the estimate is for the full roof?
I do. Yeah, fortunately, Cal Poole, the executive director of Grand Street, did get a quote from a roofer. It was around 60,000.
And then on the energy efficiency software, this is kind of a joint question. I know the solar panels are supposed to be going on the shop sometime soon. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I made defer to David. So Public Works is really overseeing that project because they're not attached to the building.
Do we have to worry about, so I guess the reason I'm asking that question is that, do we need to be thinking about fixing that roof before they go on?
No, So because of the roof evaluation, sorry, Mayor and Commissioners, we found an alternative site. So there's a grassy strip to the north of the building that's behind concrete barriers. So the solar panels were evaluated by an expert to say that the angle of the sun during the lowest horizon during the winter will not shadow the panels. So the panels will go along that north fence there and help supply electricity to the shop.
Okay, cool. And then I guess with the software, we'll be able to see like the energy we're producing and being able to utilize and hopefully getting to like, you know, net use.
Yeah,
Or
Mr. Mayor and
something like
Commissioner Dean, the software, the package that we have is the Brightly software company actually takes our energy bills and inputs them into the software, and then we're able to pull up reports. And so the good news is they went back in history, 2 years of history, have entered that data, and then we'll have, you know, so when we look at it, we'll have at least 2.5 years of data. Doing the LED lighting retrofit that we just did, plus that solar panels,
Yeah.
we're gonna see a change. And not only that, we'll be able to have a baseline for our other facilities.
Yeah.
As we do improvements, we'll start seeing and be able to report that and show the signal.
Very cool, and I'm really excited. My final question is, this just goes to Mr. Burton's comments about the facilities committee, or whatever we're calling it, board, thank you. What, I keep like, the other day I ran into one of the county commissioners, and it sounds like I think the pre-trial services are going into the second floor of the pillar building or something. What is the, before I know it was almost like 50-50 our use and the county's use. And I want to make sure that we actually are getting enough use of this space since we help pay for part of it. And so what is the, I guess, yeah, and then I know that that's kind of planning that the board will do, but I mean, we're talking about like taking down walls and putting up walls and moving people all over, and are we really maximizing the space available to us?
Sure. So, Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Dean. So the facility is much like this one in that the county does occupy more space at Lawn Justice. They have about 56% of the square footage. That being said, when we do, you know, owner type of improvements to the facility, that's a 50-50 split. Most of the other repairs and operation is paid through for rent, you know, by rents, and the county is paying a higher percentage of the rents to fund that. So.
I mean, their FTEs, I mean, basically the same as ours, isn't it? More or less.
I don't know what the ratio is today, but it's probably pretty close. And I think that's a conversation that we need to have with the county. You know, you take your best guess when you buy a building and say, we're gonna do this 50-50, let's just take a shot at it. But when it doesn't turn out 50-50, then we need to probably have a discussion and rethink the strategy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we can find an equitable way to figure it out. But yeah, I think those are conversations that are important to have moving forward.
Well, I'm just thinking with our logistics that we obviously think a lot of departments want to keep particular people together for a conducive work environment, which I think is really important, but also do people really want to be on top of each other in offices either?
Yeah. So I think good strategic discussions, and one way to tee that up is to create this board. Have elected officials on the board for both the city and the county, some management team members, and start thinking a little differently now that we have some time under the operation. Do that.
Any other comments from the commission? Please. Are you done?
No, Mr. Mayor, so I kind of summarized a lot of the projects that we had with the facilities. The one budget that I just want to present real quick is the Public Art Committee. So facilities is the liaison for the Public Art Committee. And they are Fund 233 in the packet. And they are requesting to do projects in FY '23 to the total cost of about $36,500. They've identified public art maintenance for about $1,500. Sixth Ward mural project for $5,000. And then there's a Centennial Park bike tunnel that they anticipate being $30,000. And the committee has voted to increase, request an increase from the $12,000 general fund transfer to 15. That would fund half of this project. And then they are looking for, they're going out and looking for donations for the other 15,000 to fund that project. They have a reserve in that fund. And they are, I think they're ending this year with about $38,000 in cash. So I mean, they have dollars there too, if you'd like it not to get the additional 3,000. I just wanted you to know they do have a reserve.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Troy. There are, I think, at least one not-for-profit club that wants to contribute to that mural. Are there others that are looking at contributing to these art projects?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Fever, I apologize. I do not know the answer to that question.
I shouldn't live where I do sometimes. I do information at home. But I know something's happening. And I, you know what, I encourage that. And those are the kinds of good contributions that the lunch clubs can make to our city. It really takes some of the pressure on small budget items in the last analysis, but big for us to worry about. Which tunnel? I mean, there are two. Are they talking about the one that's on the Centennial Trail per se?
That's the one I understood.
All right.
Yeah. The one that would go east.
Concerning that mural, is that, because I remember there was Mr. Coons. Is that still in play in terms of them matching the fund? Do you know?
I do not know.
I don't know that either.
We'll have to look into it.
No. I was referring to, I think Bridget,
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. The Coots family is going forward with the project.
okay.
And they do have a couple of businesses that are also contributing to the project. So the HPAC is requesting to use funds to also donate to the project.
You bet. Thank you. Good. Any other comments? Oh, go ahead, Commissioner.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, did you have something you wanted to say first?
I'll wait.
Just a question, Mr. Sampson, you said they have a reserve fund, but they're requesting funds instead. What is the goal of the reserve fund? What is that there for?
I'm fairly new with this one. So we, Bridget and myself have been interacting with this committee for about a year. It is a fairly new committee. There's lots of new folks on it. I think we have one person that's been on there more than years now. I think that the reserve has built up over time just due to not getting projects completed. So there's always, as far back as I could see in the budget, like $12,000 every year transferring from the general fund.
And I think if some uncompleted projects also from the reserve that just carry over, but it's not like the money is just sitting there with not being used. It will be used on those projects. If that helps to answer your. Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I will point out that should the commission decide to increase that contribution, it will need to come out of the general fund reserves, because as we presented the general fund, it was balanced with the exception of using $400,000 for the boiler and repairs over at the Legacy Center. There's $50,000 with we're using for the city manager contribution, and then there's a $10,000 delta to cover the vocal grant that didn't come in at the level that we had expected. So that right now we're dipping into reserves by $460,000 in the general fund. That's not, and so should you decide to move forward with the increase in the $3,000, it would add to that amount that we're taking out of the general fund reserves.
Any other comment? Yes, please, go ahead, Mr. Cooley.
Sorry, so Mayor and Commissioner Reed, to your question, some of that reserve is past donation money. So it's restricted use for some of those projects that are outstanding. So they couldn't necessarily dip into that reserve for new projects because that money is restricted for the donations that came in.
Just a quick follow-up, if I may, Mr.
Please.
Mayor, do we know how much of the reserve is restricted?
I do not, no.
Would it be possible to get information about how much of the reserve is restricted?
I'm sure we'll be fine.
Thank you.
Maybe so.
You never would have guessed.
Just a comment, I did at the VIP meeting, they do have a line in their budget that is what is for murals downtown too. So an opportunity for more public art that we maybe don't necessarily have to cover.
All right, Mr. Simpson,
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
do we have any other questions or comments for Superintendent Sampson? Not, we thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, thank you. Okay, we will move on to the director of the day. Director Kanaki. You have the rest of the meeting. Thank you, sir.
So Mayor and Commissioners, thank you for this opportunity to present our budget. We're made up of streets, fleet, parking, and capital transit. We kind of broke this up into funds. Our first page there is the transportation system department as a whole. Some of the accomplishments past year, we hired a deputy director and a sidewalk coordinator. We're happy, we maintained essential services throughout the pandemic. There was exceptions in transit due to medical and sickness, but disruptions, but paratransit was never impacted for those members of the community. Transportation received 1,091 service requests over the past year that we have addressed to date. Our goals as a department is to implement a new revised street assessment methodology, evaluate and potentially adopt a pedestrian safety program and crash reduction program over the next year or two. Implement the city public outreach processes to better serve the city. Respond to most service requests within 72 hours. And prioritize projects and identify funding mechanisms. So we are requesting one FTE this fiscal year, and that's an engineering technician / inspector. One of the things that we found over the years is our street openings are problematic. Some of them are done really well, some settle, and that tends to have on our streets. So this is the person to help go out and inspect these as they come up. Basically, make sure that we're getting the product that we need. Potential needs as a department is We're doing an LRTP update, which is the long range transportation plan update. We're planning that for fiscal year 24. A congruency plan, which is a fancy name for traffic impact modeling. We have this in our contracted services. This will help give consistent feedback to developers, engineers, similar to a water and a sewer model. So we would have the city modeled as the date that went into effect. And then, you know, for example, any development that came in, they would give us what streets and what their impact, what traffic they believe, put it in the model, and then the model basically outputs where that model is identifying the impacts. This is all done through, it would be done through a third-party consultant. So there would be consistency in the, what is given back to the developers, and then that modeling would be constantly updated so that we could see accumulating impacts in an area if there were to occur. Many city code revisions that we have just found over the past year that we just need to bring forward and have a discussion. Looking forward, where majority of our staff is located out at the city shop. Some of that older facility, so we're looking to upgrade that facility not only for staffing but for the fleet department, its fleet division itself. And then city expansion impact plan. Working with community development on the urban standards boundary, looking at what we're going to be seeing potentially coming into the city, evaluating those impacts and coming up with a plan on how to mitigate those for when they come into when they request annexation or what. Just some risks and opportunities. I hate to say that they're all risks at this point, but we're seeing increasing costs department wide. I mean, that's citywide fuel materials. Community development's vehicle, we're probably not going to see it this year. Surcharges. We were signing contracts for, say, community development's vehicle for $36,000, and now that it's getting pushed out, we get a surcharge from the company saying now it's going to cost you an extra $4,500. So we're trying to work with the city attorney's department to put in language in our contract. So when we sign this contract, there are no surcharges or without written agreement. Curbside sidewalks, fences encroaching on the site triangle. Right now, you're only required to get a permit if the fence is over 6 foot. Typically 7 feet, sorry. Typically, we get complaints that people put up a privacy fence and it's within that site triangle, and then you have to go back to them. And it's a pretty, it's not a pleasant experience for the homeowner to say that they have to take down the fence to see so see through. So try to come up with a process that at least puts that information out there for homeowners to know about before they plan. Work with the fencing companies to let them know. If you're on a corner, you should not, contact us if you have questions. Planting within the right of way and then wholly surrounded areas. We're still on the first page now. Wholly surrounded areas within annexation areas. So that's a department, and I must apologize. I failed to introduce my deputy Chris Cooey and parking manager Tim Nickerson. So we'll go to the next page here. The Streets Fund 201. We accomplished the Rodney Street reconstruction phase 1. If you've been down there lately, the trees are going in. It's looking really well, really good. We had about 283,000 square yards of chip seal last year. 29,000 square yards of mill and overlay. We used 240 tons of asphalt to fill potholes throughout the city. About 900 cubic yards of snow were removed from downtown areas this last year. As far as the traffic division, we purchased a paint truck, which will help us do the center line striping and fog line striping on our schedule and not on the contractor schedule. They replaced or installed 382 signs and did about 32 to 400 square yards of pavement markings. Pavement markings are ever under constant abuse. We put sand on the roads, people drive over them, so it's a ever challenging. So they're always out there improving those. Roadway code enforcement is also under the 201. 139 snow and ice removal requests received, 210 slip, trip and fall requests for service, and 54 site obstruction requests were received and processed. So they've been busy.
One question, Director. When you said 210 strips, trip and fall requests received, can you give an example? What kind of requests?
So, you know, if somebody thinks that a heaved sidewalk or deteriorated sidewalk is a trip hazard, the trip hazard is defined as a 1/4 inch of vertical displacement. So that 210 were service requests received. That doesn't mean that there was 210 trip hazards. A lot of those are when we get out there, we measure them like close, but they don't qualify as a trip hazard. A lot of them are taken care of by the homeowners. And then sidewalks, that was a new thing, the coordinator this year with the new revised program. To date, he's taken in 167 sidewalk requests, which we're officially closing the program for this year because we have more requests on funding.
I have yet.
75 sidewalk estimates have been given, 13 sidewalk estimates have been signed. And then there's 8 properties that had grinding opportunities for our new grinder, and 5 pending that will go out, and still running that under the pilot project. Goals, the Rodney Street reconstruction phase 2, chip seal for this year, our annual chip seal mill and overlay projects, and then begin creation and evaluation of pedestrian safety program planning and implementation in FY 23 and 24. Traffic sign color coding. This is something that we're bringing forward this year. Bozeman does it to a limited extent, but private streets, we're going to replace the green and white, the green signs. They'll be blue background with white letters. So any private streets will be denoted by blue background and white letters. Regular city street will still be green and white. A dead end street will be a white sign with black letters. And this is not only to help our drivers when they're out plowing in the winter, but also to help emergency services. So if they have, someone driving an emergency vehicle, they know that they're heading down a dead street. To be prepared for that.
So they all will be trained on that.
Yes.
So I'm gonna ask a question I should have asked you earlier today. What's the difference between a dead end and a roundabout, not a roundabout, a cul-de-sac and what's the other term? There are 3, pardon me? Well, there are like 3 different signs that identify what I would call dead ends. They might be cul-de-sacs too. It's a turnaround, basically I'm doing a turnaround. I don't know what that term was that you used, but.
So anything that isn't a through street will identify with that.
So you won't be calling them cul-de-sacs.
They'll be called cul-de-sacs, but it's just identifying that it's not a through street.
Okay, I see. So the sign will be all right.
So the only one that really, matters would be the blue and the white one, which is no private streets, that those are not city maintained streets. We've been having a lot of questions on that. And so we felt that this was a good time to do that project. We don't have that many, so we'll see how it works. Like I said, Bozeman does it as well. Roadway code enforcement, they've identified a few areas to update city code. Sidewalks can continue in implementation of the new sidewalk program and also update city code. Our next page is the capital requests. First, Fund 201. Streets. There's a message board, a drag plow. The second floor, transportation copier buyout. 5-yard dump truck and plow truck. We have dual purpose dump trucks and plow trucks. That's to replace a current vehicle that's from year 2003. The John Deere motor grader that we have leased over the past few years. We're gonna buy that out. We still need one with the cost and availability of equipment. We felt buying it out is the best option, because otherwise we're gonna be waiting for quite a while to get that piece of equipment or another lease. A pickup plow to replace one of the supervisor's trucks, unit 301, which is 2012. Superior broom. These are one of those brooms you see out on construction sites. They're big brooms on the front, and they're just called a kick broom. If we can pull like the chip seal when we do that, and then in spring cleaning the winter sand out from the curbs with that broom, it makes more efficient pickup by the street sweepers. And then the Grand Street alley. The property owner to the east, Mike Casey, approached us to redo the alley. Then in conjunction with that, we're going to work with the adjacent property owners to repave that whole area. So the parking that is behind Grand Street will also be repaved. And each of the adjacent property owners will pay their share, and the city will assist in the work to do that. Replace a pickup truck in traffic. That's a 2004, and there's no other capital request for code enforcement of sidewalks. Carryovers, we have a lot of carryovers. It's just that time of year during the construction season. So, phase 2 of Rodney will be carried over, paving the Centennial Trail. The 8th Street Avenue, that's within water budget, or water main replacement project. Sidewalk improvement program, those funds. Safe crossing at Ewing and Bozeman. Those we have the consultants selected, and they're starting their work on that. And we should probably have plans by the winter, and we'll be able to get those out for construction hopefully next summer. 11th Avenue mill and overlay, as I stated in previous commission meeting, we were planning to do that this year. But unless the Helena Sand, if they don't use that as their haul route for doing Rodney Street phase 2, then we'll do that this year. But if that's part of their haul route, we don't want to stress that asphalt with the number of trucks that are going to be going over that. Downtown multimodal study, that one's, I think next week is the first public outreach, and we're progressing with that. That includes part of the BID's Main Street grant, and then for the walking mall, and then the bigger downtown multimodal plan in conjunction. Safe routes to school budget, and then Benton curbs. That was a project that was tied into the transfer station entrance. We plan on putting curbs along both sides of Benton, basically north of the tracks there. For pedestrian safety on both paths, but B, also to delineate those turn lanes into Sun Haven and stop people from going into the dirt, which is an unsafe maneuver. So there'll be turn lanes and shift a bit, but there'll be curbs on both sides. And then we'll anticipate carryovers and sidewalks.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please.
Mr. Mayor and Director Shafi, a question on safe route to schools budget. I was looking through here really quick to see what is in there. And notably, if the pedestrian crossing at Broadway on Jefferson School is part of what might be carried over, or is it in here, or is it not anywhere?
That was a line item that is in 201.
It's in, okay, sorry, not mine.
Right? Yeah, it is. It's under the sidewalks. That money will get carried over. Some of that was commission discretion money to be identified. We are, just as the Jefferson School update, we have been working with NDT. The 15-mile-an-hour zone did go to the Highway Commission. We heard verbally that it was okay. We haven't gotten an official word on that. So once we do, we'll be start taking down the signs and putting up the 15 mile an hour. We did order some extra rectangular rapid flash beacons to put in to when we identify with coordination with MDT to get those installed this summer in preparation for next school year.
Sure, thank you.
The next page is potential needs. Crack sealing program, crack sealing pot. That's when we just go and fill the cracks in the streets. That's a program that we're revitalizing this coming year. We're trying some different methods to see how we can do that most efficiently. Larger paver, dirt roller, go on with the street maintenance on the alleys and the dirt streets. Currently using one of our asphalt rollers, but a larger, heavier dirt roller would be better to do that work. Additional service vehicles, additional plow trucks, and increased mill and overlay program. So what we're seeing with costs of street reconstruction, just using round figures, the Rodney Street project is going to cost $10 million to go from Broadway to Helena Avenue. That's pretty much unsustainable throughout the city to do that. So what we're recommending and we want to pilot is increasing our mill and overlay, which is milling off that top bit of asphalt and then going back and putting brand new asphalt in to try to extend the life of our current road system in a more efficient manner. The milling contracts are relatively small. Like this year's was $36,000. And then the city staff goes and does the paving. So it's a little bit more efficient for us to do that, but this total reconstruction for every street in the city doesn't pencil out. The summer temps and traffic, we never used to, we always were able to get summer temps, and the last 2 years, it's just nothing. We have application insurance, and they're already on board working. We're still waiting to see if, other people would be interested, but I think it's just I don't know if it's nature of the work or if there's, better jobs, lifeguarding or whatever out there, but we just haven't got the interest. Roadway code enforcement, just enforcement expenses vary from year to year, mostly postage. We try to reach out multiple times to make sure that the homeowners are notified, and then ice melt, etc. materials. Then the sidewalks, obviously we have more interest in funding, so increased funding. And then really we want to put in for the fiscal 24 budget a mobility master plan to really look at the sidewalks and really try to prioritize those routes that would be used most often, so that we can get those done and then backfill in those other areas that aren't getting the sidewalks after those. But a mobility plan would be very helpful, and then we could very directly budget money for projects identified within that plan. What's that? You missed this. Oh, yeah, sorry. Request looking 5 to 10 years. I heard about that, Jack. Yeah. We want to put in, maybe this was more of a 3 to 5, but the last chance, maybe malfunction. We want to implement the roundabout that is recommended by the Pathway intersection study. We want to budget for that and get that going to help that intersection and people traversing that. The transfer truck, which is a big fancy word for a truck and a pump, but the pump goes inside the other truck. That way we can haul double with one truck versus 2 trucks. So we don't have to have as many people out driving when we're doing asphalt, stone removal, what have you. Double drum asphalt roller, again, we're ramping up our asphalt program to try to better, when we get these mill and overlays in other areas, so that'd be part of that, part of the increased mill and overlay. Traffic, epoxy paint machine, right, the truck that we got uses waterborne paint. And because we're doing that, we can touch that up, we could paint it in the spring, touch it up in the fall. The epoxy, we have a contract trying to get right now, having trouble getting people to even look at it to do the curbs in epoxy. The curb painting lasts longer than epoxy, and that's one of the challenges that we have. Saw that this week there at the church. Potentially additional work truck and FTE is the city grows and expectations. Roadway code enforcement looking at replacing their vehicle. So our vent tracks that we're doing the snow removal on the sidewalks, budgeting for 2 sets of tires there, and then a commercial grade snow blower. Some of the areas that we go to just aren't too small for the vent tracks, and just have basically a walking snow blower to do those areas. And then, sidewalks, changing interest, expectation, policy changes, just to adapt to those as they come. I think sidewalks is going to be a discussion that sidewalks on the with the commission in the near future, just discuss that. But we'll be back for that time now. Risk and opportunities. We're seeing aging, we have some aging equipment, lack of parts. We've noticed through COVID that with some of the supply issues that some of the older stuff is just being not produced. So we don't want to get into a position where we have equipment that has obsolete equipment on it. The trolley is a good example of that. There's mechanisms on the trolley that you would either have to do a very big retrofit, or they're just they don't have the parts anymore for it. Lack of parts that we're seeing, they're getting parts, but instead of getting it that same week, we're seeing them 2 or 3 weeks out. So stock extras for parts that typically fail on certain vehicles, but continued increased costs as everybody's seen. Annex streets not to city standards, and an opportunity to get a lot of calls on dust program. We don't have a official dust control program. What the city does do is we have mag chloride that we purchase for winter snow operations, and that's to pre-wet the sand, so the sand gets sticky, so it doesn't just scatter off the ice if there is ice out there. So what we do is if we have that mag chloride left over in the spring, after the spring rains are passed, we go and grade roads on a priority basis with whatever extra mag we have. But we do not have a program that we do with every street now. What the program is, if the adjacent property owners want their street mag, we'll prep it and water it, and then they typically pay to have the dust control people come in and spray it. And that hasn't worked out well over the years, but we have some major roads that we have to try to do something with them on an annual basis. Traffic, we have curb painting, vandalism, and the curb painting contracts. Again, that's why we're looking to do a lot of the in-house. Some of our contracts just aren't large enough for these companies to really be interested in. So roadway code enforcement, we have a risk and opportunity as a request increase. That's a good, not necessarily a good thing, but we want to be appropriately staffed and funding levels so that we can address those. Sidewalks, boulevard trees causing damage to the sidewalks and curb and gutter. Everybody's aware of that. And then to better understand and collaborative working relations within city departments and mitigate hazards. So working closer with parks and everyone to make sure that we can get those addressed quickly. So the next page is the share page. These are our gas tax funds, the 240 and the 241. The 240 is our normal gas tax, and the 241 is the parcel tax that was implemented. Capital requests. Gas tax, we're going to be using gas tax money for the Rodney Street reconstruction phase 2, and then the Lawrence and Last Chance redesign to try to improve that intersection over the years. That stamped concrete is not held up as well as we had hoped, and then we do need some pet cutting improvements there. So we'll have that redesigned, and then probably have a capital request next year to get that built. And then the parcel funds have been going through with the Rodney Street reconstruction since we received them. The first map, this is just to show this is what's on tap for this summer. Chris put this map together to better illustrate the commission where we're at and what the work we're doing. So as you can see, I'll let Chris go through it to see someone put it together.
Sure. So Mayor and Commissioner, so the map you have in front of you, right, the dark outline around it is our city limits. The little green circles is our sidewalk program. Those are the signed estimates. The orange lines are the center line painting that we'll be doing all over town. The blue lines are the chip seal. So those are, most of those areas have been recently built overlaid. So we're coming behind those to the chip seal to give them some extra life. And the purple line there is over in the Phoenix subdivision area. We'll be starting the mill and overlay program there. And like Director Knoppe said, the idea here is to show you that we are trying to touch all parts of the community, and we're not focusing. The things that are not on here are like Rodney Street, 11th Avenue and things like that. Some of those larger projects. We really wanted to highlight all of the work that gets done and not just sort of spotlight those larger projects that go on. And it really feeds into the idea of that pavement preservation mentality that we're leaning to. You'll see our capital plan specifically this year and over the next couple of years will probably be more heavily skewed towards equipment rather than some of those larger reconstruction type projects as we try to move towards doing a lot of that work in-house and on our schedule.
Thank you. So the next page is the parking fund. The accomplishments that the 551 fund had this past year is addressing the ADA and maintenance items, rebuilding staffing, and we're happy to report that as of right now, we have 1,991 permits sold. Our pre-COVID number was 1908, so we have recovered from COVID. Approximately, we have about 6,300 users of the parking garage monthly, and then 16,000 monthly transactions go through the parking. So our goals for parking is to provide economical and fiscally responsible operations to all users of the system, including those that are coming in town and our residents. The one big push this year is online payments. We want to be able to allow not only travelers, but our residents, if they have a parking ticket or a parking permit, anything that they have to pay typically at the office, they can pay through an app or a link on the city. So that's one of our major pushes this year. Continue with our ADA audit progress. Where we had an ADA audit, they identified a bunch of stuff that we're addressing over a period of time, and so continued progress on that. We're looking at putting the special events permitting online as well to better allow people to more access to the city services. And then we have Jackson City Garage or the Jackson Street Garage upgrades. Parking requests. 6th Avenue door and hardware, that's part of that ADA upgrade or upgrade. The Jackson gate arm replacements, the PCO, which are parking control officers, their handhelds that they use to upgrade. Those handhelds currently are big bulk these handheld machines but inside of them, there's a cell phone. And those cell phones now are dated and they're causing some connectivity issues, and so we're gonna get those upgraded.
That's a very good question on that. The handhelds now generate these teeny tiny little tickets. They're very small. They kind of tiny little envelope that fly off your windshield sometimes, but you don't know. Would the upgrade have a different ticket generating option, or is it just a technology upgrade?
It's more of a technology upgrade. But with some of these online options, one of the things is to, hopefully you can go and check, make sure, it's blowing 90 miles an hour that day, or, think you may have gotten a ticket, you can go on online and check your license plate. Hypothetically speaking. A Meyer electric box sander, that's to assist them to sand the box and what have you, and then a coin counter that can still receive quite a bit of coins. But that'll probably get reduced once people can start paying electronically. Carryovers, there's no carryovers for parking, we're not anticipated, and potential needs, the ability to enforce ADA violations. Right now, it has to be done by HPD. They have to ticket the driver, not the vehicle. And so it's a challenge, because just today we were meeting downtown for another project, and there was a vehicle parked in a handicap stall. We were fortunate enough to have a representative of Helens Police Department with us, and they went and had a chat with the person, and they moved. And just so happened, within about a minute of them moving, a handicapped placard vehicle came and parked right where they were. So that's one thing that we'd like to look at, addressing differently, or different options for that.
I don't know, maybe that's the same question you're looking to ask, but so are we saying that we can ticket the vehicle?
According to what we have been told by legal and PD, it has to be the vehicle, there has to be the driver, not the vehicle.
So it's an MCA issue, not a city policy issue.
Correct.
That's fun.
I know, right? Anyway,
so we'll be looking, that's one of the things that we would like to look into. And, evaluate new opportunities for customers to pay. Again, we want to be as out there as possible so people can interact in their preferred manner. Continue to evaluate revenue and expenses. Talk about parking advisory committee to kind of, I don't want to say buffer, but go between the downtown and the businesses and the city, where that committee would be made up of, similar to what the parking commission used to be, but more of a, just to have them talking to business partners, and then if something does elevate to the need of change, they can bring it to us or the commission, and then we can evaluate it. Continue addressing the ADA maintenance items, and then start moving to vehicle mounted license plate recognition. So right now our handhelds only read the plate once. They only have the one camera. A vehicle mounted license plate record has 5 cameras. So those 5 cameras look at the same plate, and then they give you their best guess at what their license plate says. So you have 5 cameras looking at different angles, whereas our TCOs have 1. So we do have a fair bit of misinterpretation by the software. This would eliminate a lot of that misinterpretation. Requests looking forward, possibly expansion of the kiosk to the 600 to 900 North Last Chance Gulch. Potential garage expansions, adding surface lot levels. We have lots that are at capacity and oversold. Property acquisitions for parking developments, risk and opportunities. Part of the revisioning for crews used some of the parking facilities for condos or buildings. Removing that parking removes parking for not only the condo, but for the downtown. So to evaluate those very closely and try to mitigate those beforehand instead of having an issue. Lost revenue, the free 1 hour parking, that averages about $1,100 monthly. We are going to be asking for an increase in the permit fees to cover some of our revenue and expense differential. An opportunity is addressing the ADA maintenance items. We see that making these changes are only a benefit to not only the city infrastructure, but benefit to the community that uses them. And then possibly we're implementing the rate increase and re-examining our ticket and permitting software. So right now we do have a software that does our ticketing, but there's ever-changing technologies out there that some have better user, or more user friendly. So we're going to constantly reevaluate that. So our next fund is capital transit 580.
Can I ask a question on parking before we move on? Just a quick question. When you're looking at the request for 5 to 10 years, garage expansions, property acquisitions, et cetera, are you also considering opportunities to actually reduce the number of cars we're bringing to downtown and looking at park and ride or connecting to transit in order to not have to build more parking downtown? Is that part of the grand plan?
Mayor Commissioners, yes. I mean, that's now that we've changed models for the capital transit, it does allow for, but park and rides have always been considered because space downtown is limited. So sometimes those lots are better utilized as housing or so all the options are on the table at that. So 580, our big accomplishments this year is implementation of the new scheduling software Spare, and implementing the new flexible transit service. So the last month of the fixed route ridership, including paratransit, we had 1,366 riders. This most recent last month, we had 3,787 riders. And we've received some of our new transit vehicles that have been purchased. As you'll see in the carryovers, we are still waiting for fiscal year 21. We're carrying over that match because the buses are still forthcoming from our fiscal 21.
I think those, Mayor, I think those are pretty good numbers.
Goals: continue implementation and refinement of the new scheduling software and the flexible transit service, and to continue to build a more nimbler, more versatile fleet. So we're going away from the big buses and going to more transit vans, smaller vehicles that we can get around the streets a little bit better. One plus on those, additional to that, is the smaller vehicles are gas versus diesel. So when it's cold out, we don't run into the issues with the diesels. And then before, we couldn't get full all-wheel drive on the larger buses, but with the smaller transit vans, we can get four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive to make those rides safer for our passengers and our drivers. So as I said, our capital requests, 34,000 to replace bus 631, 632, carryover, as I mentioned before, for our buses from fiscal year 21. We're looking at as a transit manager, and evaluate expanded services, evaluate fees, access control for the facility, and then also gates, additional drivers, and then we have a cold storage building that we'd like to convert to warm storage, just to keep the buses and other pieces and parts that we have warm storage versus cold. Request looking forward 5 or 10 years, secure funding and equipment for converting to alternate fuel fleet, and evaluation of the transit as an enterprise versus special revenue fund. And then the risk is our increasing costs of operations, and then the risk and opportunities of our expanded services. get calls all the time outside the city limits. On the pie chart slide,
Yeah,
please.
so, I'm sympathetic to you, to having smaller vehicles. I get that. You have no choice but to go to gas as opposed to electric or hybrid right now.
Right now, there is, we get our vehicles through the state, and there's very limited menu of options that we have.
Sometimes I think maybe we're all just working for the state. We're really not in charge of anything. I'm just saying. Okay.
So our opportunity is, when we can, we try, we'll, try to, like, when we replace the trolley, we had looked at replacing the trolley. A diesel trolley was, this was pre the issue with vehicles, was almost 350, 360, I don't remember. And then a trolley, electric trolley was up to 700,000. So, and then the infrastructure, but that wasn't available through the state program at the time.
So we could address some of these issues like that. Just whine it a little bit.
Yeah, Mayor, I think part of the issue is that the state runs a pass-through program for the federal government. So not only are we dealing with the state, but we're also dealing with the feds.
I think this could be an opportunity for our newly minted grants coordinator. But I know that there was quite a bit of money set aside in the infrastructure bill to help move. And so I'm wondering, is that an opportunity for us to maybe, instead of waiting for vehicles that we paid for in FY '21, and those, I mean, obviously are coming, but in this fiscal year, maybe start figuring out how do we.
Mayor, I think that's a very good thought.
And since we're on electric vehicles, I failed to mention one of the accomplishments that we did get in streets, the 201 fund is, instead of buying the diesel street sweeper that was budgeted and approved last year, we were able to use a DEQ program to secure that global electric sweeper. So that's an all electric sweeper. We received the maximum grant award, which was $500,000. And then the money that's for the, that was scheduled for the street sweeper will pick up the remainder. And we're waiting on probably a revised cost estimate from what we have, but we should be fine with that. And then with the infrastructure required for the project. The next page, just some general info. The Spare software, they go through a survey periodically, and we thought that this might be helpful for the commission. There were 89 responses, which is pretty good response rate. But some of the highlights that I really wanted to point out is, why do you choose transit alternative modes for alternative versus over alternative modes of transport? 68% of respondents said it better suits their needs. I thought that was very telling when cheaper, seeing how this was done a few weeks ago with gas prices still on the rise, was only 33%. More convenient was 39%. So we're seeing a great response to the new system. And then the respondents, 68% of the users identify as deaf, blind, or a disabled person, or having a long-term health issue over ridership. The next slide we put together, this is a heat map that comes up through Spare, our new software. And it shows, obviously, in the red is where we go the most. And we overlaid the red route and the blue route from our fixed routes. So we were hitting all the places that we're still going to quite a bit. There's 4 of them there that were outside of our fixed routes, but going back to the more convenient and the higher ridership is telling that, the fixed routes weren't located poorly. It was just that I think the travel time between the two was challenging for folks. And now that they can get the basically door-to-door service, we're seeing a very big uptick.
Please.
I'm gonna have to excuse myself, but I just wanted to say this is fantastic, the information about the ridership and where it's going, this is great. I think it's a really good investment, and it's nice to see people using transit, so thank you for all the work that went into improving that system.
Thank you.
Well, I'd have to underscore that, because I've had people tell me we should never have done what we just did, because we would never get the kind of ridership we need to have. Well, you've got a couple, if you will, illustrations here that will make you differ, so yes, good to have.
Yes. And we, you know, ridership is increasing every week, you know, so we haven't plateaued. We'll move to the next page, which is Fund 610, which is our fleet services. As Troy mentioned, being brought up, solar panels, our accomplishment that's being worked with sustainability coordinator. But we also implemented the integrated business solutions of Napa Park Store again, fleet. So we realize some savings if we get parts at the basically kind of warehouse cost versus the store costs. But it's not only vehicle parts right now, that's all we're using it for, trying to get them up and running. But moving forward, they not only do vehicle parts at Napa, but they have contracts with office supplies, you know, our cutting edges for the snow plows, our brooms. So all those expenses will start going through this IPS, which their national contracts typically have a better pricing than what we could get as a city or state. I'll let Chris talk about how we revise the internal charge.
So Mayor and Commissioners, you know, our fleet operation is an internal service fund. It's funded through internal charge to the departments that use it. That methodology hasn't really been amended or updated in a few years. Even the one that was in place, you know, when Director Knopke took over, it was more of a let's keep things kind of steady for a while. So it's been relatively underfunded for a few years. Even this year with the revisions, you know, we're still retaining quite a bit of our operating budget. We're not quite charging out the whole thing. And we think that through some savings and things like that over the year, we'll get pretty close. But we took a pretty relative approach. There's an APWA guide out there that really lays it out pretty simply. We followed that along pretty closely to the letter and created new charges. So I sent it out to all the department heads to review their charges. I kept it as close as I could to steady. You know, there were some larger jumps. I capped everybody at no more than a 20% increase on the charge. Anybody that was relatively static stayed at a 5. Anybody in the middle got what it said it was supposed to be. It seemed to be relatively well received. We didn't have any requests or concerns relayed back about the charges for this year. And it'll, over the next few years, we'll keep those revisions in place in that same methodology and increase factor, not charging anybody too much more each year, or not reducing too much until it really balances itself out. And we get to the point that the fleet is actually budgeting to the point of recovering its operating budget as it should be, as it's meant to be.
So part of those revised budgets was the tires that has been talked about, that divisions are having to budget for their tires. They were always budgeting for their tires, it was just within the internal charge. But different divisions have different preferences on where they take their vehicles to get their tires.
Why is that?
I think a lot of it, like, you know, solid waste and streets, we try to, you know, these pieces of equipment we send to Kohler, these pieces of equipment we send this one, just so that we spread the use throughout the community and not just, you know, one business getting it. So we put it back on the departments and divisions this year because we were just acting as a pass through. We'd get the invoice, approve the invoice, and and then we get charged back to their insurance charge. Well, this way now that they're more in control of their fund. We used to give them a 5-year average. Sometimes that was right, sometimes they needed more. So this gives them a little bit more control on that tires when we were just kind of acting as a pass-through, so being more efficient for them in our eyes. Our goals is to fine tune the integration of I missed one. We've now gone to work orders, and our mechanics and process 1,349 work orders to date through servicing city vehicles. Our goals: fine tune the integration of the IBS system, staff training for electric vehicles, updating an asset management or replacement schedule. That's basically, we're going to put everybody on a cycle so that we don't get too many vehicles that are too far past their design life. Capital requests in here, we have a vehicle lift system to assist the mechanics working on the vehicles. The pickup to replace one of their work trucks, and then a vapor filtration system for the welding shop. There's no anticipated carryovers at this time. Potential needs: the shop area and the building is an older building. Right now, one of the potential needs is an in-ground lift, so the mechanics can get underneath some of these bigger vehicles. Overhead train and rents as an alternative revenue stream to try to reduce some of those internal charges. Request looking forward 5 and 10 years, a new building or upgraded addition, in-ground lifts and overhead trains to service each bay. And then our big risk on here is lack of availability of new vehicles and parts. We can't even get if we were to call for a new vehicle right now, we're just in 24. And that may change. They might get a.
They're not picking on you. Rest assured, they're not picking on you.
No. And that might change. They might get a flood of chips and everything, all these vehicles waiting for chips might just get, but that's what we're seeing. And then just to increase, continual increase of parts and fuel challenge for not just departments, but for the city.
Thank you. Comments or questions for Director Kanaki and his deputy?
Well, I like your report. I appreciate the way you summarized things. It's great. That's very nice.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I have a couple questions. I'm not gonna ask all of them because I know we're trying to do. But this is kind of a group of questions. In regards to like for streets, we already had the multimodal study, and I'm hoping that will inform the LRTP rewrite. And for those in the public who are listening, that's a lot of transportation plan that is a regional thing. And we, within the multimodal study that we just adopted this last year, it talks about malfunction junction to Montana 5-point intersection. That has also been something that's been cited as one of the things that inhibits, full use of the railroad TIF district, because there's no direct route in if you're taking a left or straight in. And I think in the multimodal plan, it was like, I think $10 million total, something like that, to do it, the design and the construction. But MDT obviously has a lot to do with that. And so I'm wondering, like, if we started, when we're looking at these like 5 and 10 year plans, if that's something we want to undertake, what are the steps that we'd start looking at right now, and do we need to start budgeting? And obviously it's MDT, so yeah.
When it comes to MDT,
I pray for whoever has to, I think they cannot be deal with that. But I'm just kind of thinking about, we obviously have these bigger things that need to get done. If we want areas of town that we're prioritized, that want to really flourish and there's already development happening. Do we need to start thinking about that now, or what does that look like?
So Mayor and Commissioners, yes, we need to start looking at that now, and that'll be part of the CIP discussion.
Oh, okay.
We're in discussions on the lag manual, which is the local agency guidelines, revising that to allow local jurisdictions to manage these projects. So we've already requested for the 6th Ward ADA ramp one for us to take that over instead of MDT. We've already made changes. We're just waiting on an agreement. Our hope is to continually do these pilot projects under the city's administration to try to move along these. 10 million might be a little short now with material costs, but the infrastructure bill has some discretionary funds in there. And ultimately, I think part of it would be to not only look at the major malfunction junction, but also the at-grade crossing in Montana, and possibly combining those two, because they're going to be interconnected. They're going to be very much interconnected. So we're going to start looking at that as part of our capital. But yeah, we're going to start having those discussions with them.
Yeah, and I think the director's being a little quiet in terms of his participation in this process, but the 7 large cities in the league been working with the Department of Transportation. The director has one of the first pilot projects out of the lag manual, which was written to be very difficult to use. But with the new infrastructure dollars coming down through MDT and a recognition that they don't have the staff to manage all the projects that are going to exist, they want to take advantage of local people to manage these projects to get the projects completed. And our folks are at the front end of that whole process.
In terms of the malfunction junction, where are you guys at in trying to convince the
Mayor and Commission, so the 5-point intersection study was reviewed by MDT prior to its coming forth for adoption. So they know we're looking at a roundabout and they've already made their comments. I'm not saying it's a done deal, but we're farther down the road than just closing it.
Thank you, sir.
2 more questions and then this one's easy. Do you know how much we would need to fully fund the sidewalk replacement program to meet the demand we currently have?
Mayor and Commissioner, can I ask a clarifying question? Is that the number of requests that we have now, or is that citywide?
I mean, we'll just say requests we have now.
So I can get back to you on a number on that.
Yeah.
It really depends, as much, if you have corner lots, then those are a higher cost versus a lot of, like an average city lot that's only a 60-foot frontage or something like that. So it really depends. I can add up what estimates we have now and then extrapolate to the number of requests and the numbers to achieve a ballpark number.
Okay, very awesome. Then my final question is, this goes back to one of the things that you first talked about in your presentation, and it's a conversation of, obviously reconstruction of the street at the scale that Rodney has been is not sustainable. It's not something we can do, citywide by any means. And how that dovetails with the continuous request for annexation. And we already have a lot of streets in town that obviously are not complete, they're not even paved. And so I guess one of the concerns that I have, and I don't think this is something we necessarily take into consideration when we are doing the reviewing annexation requests or even, variances, etc., that there's that initial cost for new development that they have to cover of, street maintenance, but then once we take over the right of way, do we actually know that the assessments and property taxes they are paying are going to cover the maintenance that's required for the life of that street? And that's like, I'd love if we could get to a place where we can have a process where we can do the math and say, this is what it's gonna cost the city, not just in this first 5 years, but 30 years down the line, because we are in the circumstance where, I mean, I don't know when the last time Romney had been worked on, but you know, let's say 40 years later, we're having to reconstruct the whole thing. And there obviously are hundreds more streets like that around town. And we're not, I mean, fiscally, there's just no way.
So Mayor and Commissioner, I can answer that partially for you. We don't look at projected property taxes. What we're expecting is, as we've seen with a lot of developments, the development changes over the years. But what we are now doing is when we annex X amount of miles of road, we are looking at how much our operators and how much our maintenance money can sustain with current staffing. So moving forward, we have a large addition like West Side. We would, in the report to the staff report to you, we would say this would require, one more FTE to manage this area, or another vehicle, or whatever. What we think is the impacts on the maintenance side, not just the initial annexation side.
Okay, that'd be really helpful. And I think too, I think a lot of folks are really excited about, for example, with the new building downtown that went up, and I'm very excited that, Pure View can be in there and everything else, but the highest value properties within that building are now exempt from property taxes and assessments because they're owned by the clergy. So, or the diocese, and I think that that's something that, we're contributing, and we contributed TIF dollars, we gave a discount. I think it's one of those things that we really have to think about the long-term impacts of.
Did we?
Yeah, we paid for sidewalks and we sold the property for $50,000 less than market value. Which is fine. I mean, I think it's gonna produce a lot of activity on the first 2 floors downtown, but the highest value properties in that building we don't have access to now. And, I think that we just have to think about the long-term impacts of how do we actually pay for a growing city if we are already, $40 million behind in water, wastewater, for example. And who knows how much in streets.
Yeah, I think the third part of that is what we're gonna step into after the budget, and that's the capital improvement plan, where we have a full inventory. What do we own? What condition is it in? Are we still in a 100-year replacement cycle?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we establish street maintenance assessments and all of that ties into the same conversation.
Good.
I'm done.
Any other final comments?
I thought today's meeting was excellent. I appreciate the staff report to us. That's good.
Thank you. Are there any public comments? Anyone from the public wishes to address the commission? Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I do not have any raised hands, but I do have several comments that were placed in the Q&A, if I can read them into the record.
Please do.
From Mark Judeman, is the energy efficiency study that was mentioned by facilities an energy performance contract, as has long been discussed? He goes on to say, are the funds set aside to cover the cost of the investment grade audit, IGA, in case agreement is not reached on the energy performance contract? And that is all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any final comments from the commission? This meeting is adjourned.
Condos in the city.
Two or three.
You know,
I didn't know you could actually own